Hello. So last video on the obesity, weight control, I talked about glycemic index. The glycemic index, to refresh, is the elevation of blood sugar related to ingestion of any particular food. Usually people consider white bread as a standard and then they compare different foods to have different glycemic index. But today I'm going to introduce you to another concept which is very important. It's called glycemic load. So understand that glycemic index is the sugar elevation and the glycemic load is actually a product of glycemic index multiplied by amount of carbohydrates. And this is very important because there will be substances or food items that has a very high or high glycemic index but may not have high glycemic load because the amount per 100 grams of that particular food is not high in carbohydrate, but whatever it has, it absorbs quickly and the sugar goes up. So now you have to understand glycemic index and then also the glycemic load. I'm going to give you glycemic index of some of the standard stuff that we know and then talk about the glycemic load. For example, white bread, as I said, is glycemic index of 100. And if you take it, the glycemic load per serving would be 13. To understand a little bit better, the glycemic index of the stuff which is less than 55 is considered low. 55 to about 70 or 69 is considered medium. And of course, higher than 70 is considered high. And food which are high in glycemic index are bad. Now, people also talk about glycemic index per day because, you may have a glycemic index which is high at one time because you consumed a cake, while total glycemic index may be low. So people like to see a less than 80 glycemic index in a day. And more than 120 is considered high, and that is detrimental to the weight loss. So again, to say that glycemic index per serving should be less than 55, which is good. 56 to 69 is medium. More than 70 is bad. And per day greater than 120 of glycemic load rather, is bad. So now going through some of the common products that we know that have a glycemic index which are less or more compared to the white bread. To just give you an example, apple would be 55. Remember what I said about the apple? That because it has fiber, the glycemic index is low. But the carbohydrate content is there in an apple. So the glycemic load of an apple is 12. To give you a watermelon, the glycemic index is high, but the glycemic load is very low because in 100 grams of watermelon, even though there is a sugar, the total sugar is so low that the glycemic load per 100 gram is very little. So the watermelon, even though has a high glycemic index, is a good food to have because the load is low and it has a lot of water with it. To give you another example would be a jam. Glycemic index 91. Glycemic load 12. It has a lot of sugar in it. So the pizza glycemic index is 86 and glycemic load is 68. So essentially you can go on any of the websites and look at the glycemic index and the glycemic load and then find out what is good or bad for you. Again, we have to take into account different meals that we're going to consume. So the glycemic load of less than 10 each time is considered low or good. 11 to 19 is moderate. And of course, greater than 20 of glycemic load is bad. So you got to modify the amount of carbohydrate that you're going to consume from your each meal so that the glycemic load is hopefully closer to 10 and not exceed 20 at a given time. And of course, this is translated to the entire day, where glycemic load of greater than 120 is bad. So you can monitor your glycemic index and glycemic load and go from there. Couple of quick concepts that have been popularized by various people, including a guy named Jason Fung, F-U-N-G. He happens to be a nephrologist, and I have talked about him to a lot of people. He has a few YouTube videos, and he also has a book called Obesity Code. Beautiful, very educational book. But he talks about concepts which are similar to another physician from India who has free service for people in India who are diabetic or pre-diabetic. And the theories or the formulas or the education that both these guys offer is very similar. So I'm going to touch briefly about fasting. So the concept is fasting is not completely lacking eating, but both these guys suggest to do 2 meals a day. The Indian physician, who follows almost 30,000 people on a WhatsApp, advises to select 2 timings where you are hungry. So the concept is you do not eat unless you're hungry. The American concept is to have 2 meals, say 12 noon and 6 p.m. So there is a fasting which occurs between 6 p.m. to 12 noon, during which time you can have tea, coffee, vegetable broth, and according to the Indian guy, you can even have tomatoes as solid food, limited quantity of course. Each meal should be finished within the span of 55 minutes and limited carbohydrate. This fasting between 6 p.m. to 12 noon next day leads to depletion of energy from the liver, and that is replaced or replenished by the fats. So you tend to lose the fat. The keto diet, which is present recently, is also thought to be producing in such a way the effect that you have a fat burning. I don't want to go into the keto diet in this particular video, but there are breath tests and a blood test available to monitor your ketone levels, because having too much of ketone is extremely dangerous, and it needs to be done with a great supervision, full understanding, and monitoring of ketones. But simple fasting, as long as you're not diabetic, is very easy to do, and you could do a 6 p.m. to 12 noon fast. People also have done once a day fasting, and that also works. Please remember that if anybody is diabetic and is on diabetic medication, they will definitely need to adjust the timing and the dose of their medication, and this cannot be achieved without consent and advice from own physicians. But this is certainly good for weight loss as long as you're not taking a diabetic medication. Again, the restricting carbohydrates is not anything new and should be done, and will definitely help to lose the weight. Please be advised that there is no one single thing that is going to make you lose weight. There is no single thing that is going to make you not have the diabetes, but a combined effort of exercise, diet, limiting carbohydrate, fasting, whatever suits you. The reason for failure is that people cannot continue what they start with forever. So you must follow a diet that you're going to continue for a long time and not fall off the wagon. Thank you for listening. If you like it, please subscribe. Thank you. Have a nice day.